Good morning. My name is Carol Williams. Please remain standing in body or in spirit for the reading of God's words. Now hear these words from Esther 44:13 through 17. He sent back this answer: Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, nor night or day. I and my attendants will fast with as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, and even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Okay, you may be seated. Well, good morning, everyone. Like I said before, my name is Zoey Pippin, and Pastor David has given me he asked me to preach today, which I'm really excited to do. And this is the third time I've done this. The first time I talked about Romans 12:2, my favorite Bible verse. The second time I talked about my favorite Bible story. And so when I was thinking about what am I going to do for the third sermon, I was like, I'm out of things. I did my favorite Bible verse, I did my favorite story, I got nothing. Like, I don't have anything left for this. So in my I don't know what to do sort of moment, I did what every teenager does. I consulted the internet. I Googled it. I was like, I have talked about these two things. What do I do next? And there was generated this long list of things, all these different Bible stories, and I recognized every single one of them, except for Esther. And it was like, you should talk about Esther, was one of the options, and I was like, I don't know that Bible story. I knew that it was a book in the Bible, but I didn't know the story. I couldn't remember what happened. I didn't know any of the context. And then I was like, that seems kind of, I feel like I should know that. So I read it. And it's pretty short. It was about 10 chapters. It went really quickly, but I really enjoyed it. It was sort of this crazy whirlwind story, and all of these things happened. And after I was done reading it, I was doing more research about it, and I learned that Esther is the only book of the Bible that never once mentions God. Not one time. And I was like, that can't be right. So I go back and I'm looking through it, and it's true, not one time. And that was a bit of a revelation, because I didn't realize that. I read through the whole book, all 10 chapters, and I didn't notice that anything was missing. I didn't feel like that it didn't talk about God. I didn't recognize that. I didn't see that. And so I kind of wanted to talk today about why I think that is, and why Esther is such a beautiful and impactful story, even though it never once talks about God. And so if you're like me, and before now you didn't really know the story of Esther, I'm going to give you a brief overview. You can go to the next slide, by the way. So the Book of Esther takes place about 100 years after the Jews have kind of been exiled from their land. And one of the main characters is the king of this city. And the king is not exactly a stand-up guy. He's a bit of like a drunken idiot, kind of. He's a mess, and he has a lot of issues. So there's this big party, and he's throwing this party, and he wants his wife to come out. He calls for his wife, and he says, I want you to come show everybody how beautiful you are. And she was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. She said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so the king, being not a great guy, says, okay, well, you're not my wife anymore. And he has her put to death, and then he holds a beauty pageant. He's like, I need a new wife. So here's a beauty pageant to see who's going to be my new wife. And one of the contestants of this beauty pageant was Esther, a Jewish woman who was disguising the fact that she was a Jew. The king didn't know that she was Jewish, and he saw her, and he was like, she's perfect. I love her. She's beautiful. She's my new wife. And so he brought her in, and she became the queen. And a little while later, not long after she became the queen, her uncle, who raised Esther was raised by her uncle, a Jewish man named Mordecai. He was walking around kind of out by the palace, and he overheard these two men plotting to kill the king. And so Mordecai is like, oh, that's not good. And so he goes to Esther, and he tells her, and Esther tells the king, the plot is foiled, the king is saved, and Mordecai is given the credit. It's like this whole kind of soap opera-esque feeling to this story. And then, so we get the whole Mordecai saved the king. And then the next thing that happens, we meet Haman, who, again, not a nice guy, but the king likes Haman. And so he's kind of promoted him to this, like, second in command, and he makes this decree that anybody who sees Haman is to bow down and praise him. So Haman's out walking around through the city, and he runs into Mordecai. And Mordecai, being a Jewish man, he says, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to bow down to you. Like, I'm not going to do that. And Haman, he's like, he doesn't like that at all. And then he finds out that Mordecai is Jewish. So in his anger, he goes to the king, and he says, he convinces him. He comes up with this whole plot. He convinces the king to make a decree that all the Jewish people have to die. They're going to kill all the Jews. On this specific day, they like roll a dice to decide what day it's going to be. And then it's this whole decree that all the Jews on this day are to be executed. And so obviously, it's not good. It's not good. The Jews are upset. They're scared. They're like out in the streets praying. And Esther sees what's going on, and she sends a message to her uncle. She says, what's happening? And Mordecai says, well, the king wants to kill all of us. He wants to kill all of our people. And he says, Esther, you have to talk to the king. Like, can you do something to fix this? And at the time, there was this law that the king had that the wives of the husbands were not allowed to go and call on them. She was not allowed to call on the king. She could only speak to him if he came to her first, if he asked for her. And she responds to Mordecai. She goes, I can't, like, he hasn't called for me. He hasn't asked to see me. I can't go ask to be with. I can't tell him that I've lied about who I am. You saw what happened to the last woman who defied him. She's not here anymore. Like, it's not okay. And so Mordecai responds with, and you can go to the next slide. Mordecai sends back his answer. He says, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but that you have come to the royal position for such a time as this. And so Mordecai gives essentially this, boiled down, this is do the right thing. Like, who's to say that you weren't placed in this position so that you could help us? Like, I know it's scary, but you have to help your people. Like, you of all people are the one that can save us. And so she says, you're right. And if I perish, I perish. I will go to the king, and I will explain, and I will ask him to spare the Jews. And so she does. She goes, and she says to her husband, I want to meet with you, and I want to meet with Haman. And so that night, after Esther has asked for this meeting, this banquet with Haman and the king a few days later, the king he can't sleep. He's trying to sleep and he can't, so he asks for like the royal kind of like history to be read to him at night, because that makes for good bedtime reading, I don't know. And so he has this guy read him all the things that have happened, and it just so happens that one of the things that is read to him, of the things that happened, was Mordecai saving his life. And the king, he's like, oh my God, I completely forgot. Like, I totally forgot that this man saved my life. And so the next morning, he wakes up, he goes to Haman, he says, Haman, we've got to honor him. So Haman is forced to take Mordecai around on a royal horse and parade him around the city and have people kind of praise him and show him how happy they are that he saved the king. And so Mordecai, he didn't like that. But then he got the invitation to go eat with the king and Esther, and he's feeling all proud of himself. He's feeling very good. And so he goes to this banquet with Esther and the king. And Esther comes in, and she looks at her husband, and she says, okay, look, first things first, I'm a Jew, surprise. And second thing, this man, Haman, has decided that he wants to kill all of us, that he has tricked you into thinking that we should kill all the Jews, including myself and my people. And the king, he sides with Esther. He says, he's like, that is not okay, you're right, I shouldn't have done this. And he immediately, like in that moment, has Haman put to death in the same way that he wanted to kill Mordecai. So it's very poetic justice things going on. And so that solved the problem of Haman, but what it didn't solve was the fact that in the city at this time, the law was that any royal decree signed by a king could not be overturned. There's nothing you could do about it, it had to happen. So Mordecai and Esther come up with this idea. They're like, okay, well, we can't get rid of the law that wants all the Jews to die, so they make a new one, that on the same day in which all the Jews are supposed to be killed, now the Jews are required to fight for themselves, to stand up for themselves, and that anybody who tries to attack them, the Jews are allowed to attack with equal force, and that they are to kill anybody who tries to kill them. And so the Jews are saved, and everybody throws a big party, and Mordecai and Esther are the heroes, and it's this, they have all these feasts, and everybody's happy and celebrating. And so that's basically the whole summary of Esther. Like I said, it's a bit of a whirlwind. There's all these things happening, but at the end of it, the Jews are saved, and everybody has a great meal. And so the question, and you can go to the next slide, the question remains, well, where was God in all of that? In all of that mess and all of those things, where was he? Because like I said, not one time is his name ever mentioned in the story. But there's a lot of things within the Book of Esther that where you can see God's work, where there's like these sort of coincidences that aren't coincidences, that you see his kind of hands moving around, like you see the Esther in the very beginning of the story, that of all the women the king could have chosen, he chose a Jewish woman, unknowingly, but he chose a Jewish woman, a member of God's chosen people, to be his queen. And then we see it again, that Mordecai just happens to be in the right place at the right time to overhear the plot and to save the king. Again, when Mordecai refuses to bow down to Haman, we see that sort of like he's going to believe what he's going to believe. He's not going to bow down to somebody because it's against what he feels is right. We see it again when Mordecai sends his reply to Esther, that he tells her, do the right thing, which in itself is a big part of our religion, that we do what is right even when it's hard. And that's what he tells Esther. You see God's hands at work there. And then it happens again. The king just happens to stumble across that piece of reading to remind him that Mordecai saved his life that night, right before he's supposed to meet with Esther. And again, when the king has Haman put to death, we see God's masterful plan just sort of laying out the perfect way it's supposed to. And finally, in the end, when everybody throws this big feast and they're celebrating and they're praising. And so they all feel like coincidences, but they're not really coincidences, because and although he's not mentioned, we don't hear his name, you can see God's presence. And that is what I felt when I read this book and I learned that God's name wasn't mentioned. I was like, that can't be right, because he is in the book, even without his name being written, even without it spelling it out for you, or even without saying, oh, Esther heard the words of God. She might not have heard it as a voice in her head from God, but she heard God through Mordecai. And Mordecai was experiencing God through his actions and where he was. So you're seeing God's hand at work and stitching all of the pieces together. And so as I was sort of prepping this sermon, and I went down this rabbit hole, and I wanted to find where more places in the Bible where it talks about it. And there are hundreds of verses about his plan and how he works. It's like the thing I found the most, and so you can go to the next slide. And we see it in these 4 verses, but not just these 4. Like I said, there were hundreds, but Romans 8:28. And when we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love, so are we called according to his purpose for them. Deuteronomy 31:8. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Proverbs 16:9. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Isaiah 45:15. Truly, O God of Israel, our Savior, you work in mysterious ways. Each of these different verses, each of these times in the Bible, and so many more, are talking about God's plan, that he has a purpose, that he has a plan, and you might not know what it is, or you might not understand, but it's working, that everything's going to work out to be okay. And since we were little kids in Bible school, they tell you that God has a plan, and that's something that I've always known, and I think a lot of us have always known. But as a teenager and as a person, and as I go through life, I find myself often questioning, well, what is the plan? Right? I'm told God has a plan, so my next question is, God, could you clue me in? What's the plan? What's going on here? And it often, I used this analogy at an FCA meeting, and Coach Mulligan, you'll remember, but it kind of feels a lot of times like I'm in a play, and I don't have the script. The director's like, okay, go do it. But I don't know the words. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know where I'm supposed to go next. Or if I'm in a game and I don't know the plays, I don't know what's going on. And I'm always praying, God, show me the plan. And what I've learned is, and I stumbled across this verse. You can go to the next one. And this verse might, there's not a next slide. Oh, well, that's okay. I have it here, and so I'll read it off for you, so I make sure I get the words right. It's okay. We'll move on. I just didn't get sent over. Here we go. Also, it's Micah, from the book of Micah, Micah 6:8, and it says, "Know, O people, the Lord has told you what is good, and that is what he requires of you, to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." So when I read those words, I think to myself, well, I've always felt like I don't know the plan, but that just told me what his plan was. God's plan for you is to love mercy, to walk humbly with him, and to do what is right. And so all of these times that I'm sitting here and I'm asking God, show me what to do. Like, where am I supposed to go next? Like, am I supposed to do this thing or that thing? Am I supposed to help this person or help that person or do this event or do that event? Those questions that I have for him, what is your plan? He's already given me the plan. He's given me the script. He wrote it out pretty clearly in this massive book here we call the Bible, because that is our script. That is the plan. He says all of those details, all of the things that we get stuck on aren't necessarily that important, like, am I supposed to take this job? Am I supposed to go to school here or there? Those, while are important details now, are not the most important part of his plan, because the plan is and always will be to love and be loved by him and to share that love with everybody else. That is kind of the basis of our faith, and I think that is essentially sort of the message from Esther, is that yes, God might not have spoken to her directly or told her exactly what to do or exactly where to go, but the plan was the same in the book, that she was supposed to do what was right, even when it was hard. And so you go through the Book of Esther and you see that, yes, God is there, even when you don't think about him, even when you're like, I don't see you right now, he's there. And he's speaking to you, and he's given you that script, he's given you that plan in the form of the Bible and his words. And so it's not this question of, God, show me your plan. It's, God, how do I fulfill that plan? Help me to do what is right, to love you, to walk humbly with you. Because, again, that is the plan. And I'm kind of like a broken record here, but I think that is a big part of our faith, and something that I often struggle with, and maybe some of you struggle with as well, is trying to figure out what the right move is, what the right step is, when really all I need to ask myself is, am I doing the right thing? Am I helping others? Am I being kind? Am I looking for God? Am I loving others? Am I sharing that light with him? And so that's sort of the boiled down, the main message of this whole thing, is that God is there. In the Book of Esther, when you don't hear him, when you don't see him, he's still there, moving things at work. In your life, when you can't figure out what the next step is, or you're asking, where are you? I don't see you, I feel alone, and I'm scared, he's there. He's there for all of it, in every moment, in every aspect, in every dream, in every thought, in every step we take, he's there. And his plan for you never changes, and that's to love and to be loved. And it's a good plan, and it's a great plan, and it's a perfect plan. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all so much for listening to my rambling. Yeah, please stand.